This is a snapshot of who the Canadian postdoc is. Although official numbers do not exist as to how many postdocs there are in Canada, estimates from mostly the G13 universities and our own estimates have come out with a number around 6,000, and that's the number that we usually quote. And so with our response rate, we got about a 20% response, which is really good for a survey of this sort of really sometimes disengaged population. We're almost 50-50, 56% male, 44% female. Found it interesting that 20% didn't say. Very telling is that we found that 48% of postdocs are between the ages of 30 and 35, and that 80%, over 80%, are over 30. So we're talking about a group who are in their early 30s, most. 61% are either Canadian or permanent resident of this country, and almost half have a spouse or a common law partner. Almost 30% have children. We often talk about there are postdocs who have degrees other than a PhD, and they mostly fall in the MD category, but 88% of those who took our survey actually have a PhD, and almost half of them completed that PhD in this country. The majority of those who answered our survey were in their first postdoctoral appointment, which usually means between years 1 and 3, but 25% were in their second. 70% within 3 years post-PhD graduation, and then 30% were 4 years or more. And this is telling because a lot of postdoctoral fellowships and funding is only available to those within the first 3 years of their PhD graduation. So that 30% cannot access any external funding. This is always the bone of contention, and this is one of the things we really wanted to get out of the survey, is because we've been talking a lot about postdocs being undercompensated. So this is what we found out about the stipends of postdocs. 78% of postdocs make less than $45,000 a year. The mean actually ended up being $38,000 a year, and 35% were at the 30 to 35K. A lot of universities set their minimums around what the funding agency's minimums are, and I know for CIHR that's $36,750. So it falls in around the median. The mean is the minimum, pretty much. It doesn't rise much about the minimum. And then if we compare that to people outside the postdoc experience who either have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, or a PhD. So these are people outside academia. This is their mean, or outside the postdoc for sure. This is the mean average salary that they would have. If you have just a bachelor's, your mean salary is about $45,000. If you have a master's, it goes to $60,000, and if you have a PhD, it goes to $65,000. So you can see that postdocs are making significantly less than what they would if they were outside the academic realm. And this is where we got that statistics. And then we were really interested as to where postdocs were getting that salary. And the most obvious thing from this graph is that 50% of postdocs are receiving their primary compensation through their supervisor's research grant. And we estimate that the majority, not all, the majority of those large grants that support postdocs are those from the Tri-Council. Those either from SSHRC, NSERC, or CIHR. We didn't ask that, but that's an assumption that we're making. Another 18% get their primary stipend directly from those agencies through fellowships. And then you see kind of a hodgepodge of other things: private sector companies, foreign governments, provincial governments, training grants. But what was telling for us is that, between 65 and 68% for sure are getting money directly from one of the Tri-Council. So that's public funds. And that becomes important when we talk about taxation. The access to benefits. So we asked postdocs in our survey if they had access to any of these some of these very basic benefits. Some of them are a little bit more extended. Things like sick leave, parental leave. Parental leave being about 10% of our respondents had any access at all to parental leave, which you consider most of them are over 30, you're in prime childbearing years. Retirement, childcare, childcare subsidies, medical leave, housing subsidies, CPP. By and large, we do not have access to those sorts of benefits, and many people in our survey would have indicated that would be something that they would like to have. But funny enough, when we asked postdocs if they were satisfied with their postdoctoral training, by and large they said yes. Over half of the respondents who answered the question said, yeah, 54% said, yeah, I'm actually quite satisfied. And when we asked them, facing the economic realities of would you have your goals changed since the beginning of your postdoc? And by and large, most of them have not. We don't know if that has to do with the majority of the respondents being within the first 3 years. So they're still at the point where they have a lot of hope into moving into that coveted position. We still don't know, and I guess we'll have to see further on. We also asked the opinion of postdoc status. And so when we asked postdocs, do you think that as a postdoc you are a trainee, or do you think as a postdoc you are an employee? And this is really how it comes down. And having worked on this particular issue since the beginning of CAPS, this is pretty much how it falls out. That 50% of postdocs, or roundabout, feel that they are an employee, and about 50% of postdocs feel that they are a trainee. And we've analyzed the data a couple of different ways, if it has to do with how many years you've been a postdoc, or what part of the country you're in, or a lot of different variables. And it doesn't really there's no real reason that we get this split. It's that postdocs, you do see after 4 or 5 years a higher percentage of postdocs who believe that they should be employees. But there's never been a clear indication from the survey data why we have this pretty much 50-50 split. We gave a section for postdocs to write their comments. And the comments actually gave us a lot of information. And we grouped them based on if the postdoc was satisfied or if the postdoc was unsatisfied, and then we kind of grouped them based on the tone or the theme of what they were saying. So from unsatisfied postdocs, the top things that they brought up were that they had little respect or recognition, they had little access to training, they were very upset about their compensation, their career progression, and then when they're unsatisfied, you see mentoring by the supervisor. Whereas if you look at satisfied postdocs, again, they have issues with respect and recognition, better pay, career transition, and training, but then you see the issue of benefits. And we think that the real major predictor on whether or not a postdoc is satisfied with their career at the moment versus unsatisfied has to do with this key interaction with their mentor. That interaction is key. If that interaction is a good one, generally postdocs are satisfied. If that interaction is not a good one, then you see general dissatisfaction, which really underlines the power that a mentor has in both the career progression and the experience of a postdoc during that period. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but this just gives me the general gist of some of our comments. And if you want to read that one, I would go through. But the second one is really, really telling, is how on earth can it be that a university does not know who a postdoc is? We tend to be low numbers in universities, but considering our place in the academic milieu, the fact that a lot of universities just don't even know who a postdoc is very indicative of some of the dissatisfaction we see. And the first one really focuses on the power of the mentor or the supervisor. If that relationship is good, then the relationship is good. If that relationship is sour, there exists very little administrative wiggle room, and that's of course changing on an institution by institution basis. But if that's a bad relationship, it signs a very negative career path sometimes.